All right, guys, check this out. We are testing all of these turbos on this truck right now, back to back, same day, same dyno, all the data. We're gonna get a lot of data: EGT, drive pressure, boost, power. We get all the numbers and we go over them with you in this video. This truck is a 1998 12 valve with a 180 horsepower P-pump. For fueling, we have 055 delivery valves, stage 2 power jets, a hot rod lift pump, AFC live, and a rack plug. We have a transmission, head studs, a 178 208 camshaft, a PDD air filter, and a 4-inch exhaust. All right, guys, the dyno graphs are up for these 4 different turbos we tested on this truck. One thing I want you to notice is this section right here in the graph. We spent a lot of time and a lot of thought to make sure these tests are fair and repeatable. It's very easy to accidentally or on purpose, depending on your goals, to cheat a dyno. If I come into the window hot, if I start the run higher, it's gonna look like this turbo is just destroying this other turbo, but really it's just like I got into it earlier. So you'll notice these all start at the same power level, all 4 runs, and they diverge as a result of the turbocharger, not as a result of me starting to run higher or lower or anything like that. This right here is the HX35. You have to remember this. ... HX35. The dot and a dash. This is your K27 right here. The solid line is your Aggressor 6064, and the dashes only is your Aggressor 6265, and this is an S300 based turbocharger. Let's start by comparing the HX35 and the K27. You'll notice right here, they start the same. The spool up is identical. They're following each other right along this line here. Spool up is not different. Where it diverges is when the K27 starts pulling away. So the K27 has a slightly bigger compressor wheel, and it also has a different turbine housing design. Now the K27 is like Borg Warner's version of an HX35. It's actually designed for the Cummins application. We've really liked this turbo, and you can see it really does outshine the HX35. As far as power goes, we're looking at about 516 horsepower on this K27 versus about 461, 462 for the HX35. So that's a nice bump in power with literally no penalty in spool up. Like, it's better in every way than the HX35. So that's really pretty cool. You don't see that very often, but we here are big fans of the K27. Next up, let's look at power, is a 6064. This is a nice jump in power here. You can see down here, the solid line, we're a little bit behind in spool up. Let's see how far back we are. Is it a lot or a little? So let's go to 300 horsepower here. So 300 horsepower line in both the K27 and HX35, we hit that right about 1809 RPM. In the 6064, we have that same power at 1837 RPM. So basically 30 RPM later, you're at the same power. Let's go up to 350 horse. We're 1870 versus 1900. So basically you're 30 RPM behind with a 6064 versus a K27 and HX35. That's not going to be really perceivable in the truck. Maybe a touch, not a lot. But the power up here is very noticeable. So I'm a big fan of this 10 blade 64 millimeter turbine wheel. It just works awesome. The power level up here, we're up to 570, 573, 572, somewhere in there. So that's a huge power bump over the X35 and a big power jump over the K27. Now let's move on to our S300 based charger, the 6265. Why would you consider this? Well, first off, it makes a lot more power. I mean, you look at this, we're over 600 horsepower, 609 horsepower to the ground. It's just amazing to me. But it does come with a penalty in spool. This is a one, you actually see there's a pretty substantial difference in spool. So back to the 300 horsepower mark, again, we're right at 1809 with the stock chargers, and we are up to 1930 RPM, so 120 RPM difference. You're gonna feel that. It's gonna be slower to spool, and you'll notice that when you're driving around on the roads. It's not bad by any means. Driving this, it's totally acceptable to me. I think the trade-off for the big power is well worth it over the K27 or the HX35 if you're looking for some more power. Another benefit of the S300s is they're more robust than any of these other chargers. The turbine shaft is larger, the bearings are larger. This is a stronger turbo than your HX35 modified units. You'll get more mileage out of it. You're much more likely to break a turbine shaft in one of these turbos than here, but that extra weight comes with a penalty. I almost wonder if we're a little fuel limited on this one. There may be even more power here yet. Not sure. I'll find out soon. Anyway, for power numbers, it's a pretty noticeable difference. Let's look at the torque. Let's kind of see how that looks here just a little bit. So torque actually very interesting. I'm going to focus right now versus the 6064 versus the 6265. We actually make 1340 on that 664 versus 1290 on the 6265. So we actually made a little bit more torque with the 6064. That is an indicator of quick spool up. It just got to peak boost early in their RPM range, and the lighter turbine wheels, lighter shafts, they just do that. But out here you can see how much better that 6265 carries the torque, and that's why the horsepower diverges, where it just makes more and more horsepower. It makes more torque at a higher RPM, that's what makes more power. When you compare the HX35 to the K27, spool up is identical. It just diverges here as they get to the peak power. And with that better turbine design, that more airflow on that K27, the torque carries better and makes more of it. So no surprise there. Let's take a look at boost. Let's see what the things are doing for boost. All right, you're seeing the same pattern over and over and over. The K27 and the HX35 are identical, and they just diverge as they get more power. So the K27 makes more boost. Not surprising, it has a bigger compressor wheel. The 6064 is a little bit slower to build boost. It spools up slower, we know that. But it sure makes a lot more of it. It carries it really well. It actually makes more boost than 6265. We're talking 43 pounds of boost versus 40. Again, with that better turbine flow and that bigger wheel, the 6265 carries it better. The 6064 peaked earlier, peaked higher, and that's why we got that big torque number, but it couldn't maintain it as the RPM kept climbing, whereas that 6265 could hold it and held it way better. They all fall off as RPM climbs because they can't move any more air. As the engine consumes more, it's going to drop pressure because they cannot move more air. The 6265 carries it better, and that's what makes better power out towards the higher RPM range. K27 versus the HX35, same story. It makes more boost, holds it better. The HX35 actually drops a little quicker here, then it kind of just maintains the same distance from the K27. The boost tells a story, that this follows your power curves very, very closely. So on these boost numbers, you might find like this HX35 peak boost was 33, boost on K27 was 35. Those are not necessarily high boost numbers. You've probably got trucks at home with a stock 35 making around 40. You gotta know, we did well over 100 runs on all these turbos. We did wastegate tuning extensively to make the best power we could with each turbo. Things you gotta realize, we're at 6,000 feet elevation, so our air is thinner to start with, and so our boost is always lower here than if you guys are around sea level. Second, this truck has a camshaft. That means that engine is gonna consume the air easier. It's gonna move it more efficiently. So it's going to get that same power through with a lower boost number, which we're seeing right here. We worked every turbo over pretty extensively on the wastegate tuning to make sure everything was perfect. Yeah, so 33 on the HX35 is what it was, and we never made better power. With the wastegates really closed, we just made a lot more heat, a lot more drive. We didn't make more power. Let's go take a look at some heat now and see what these chargers did for some heat. So this is a much different looking graph. So far, every graph we looked at is pretty much a mirror of the one before, just different places, but they all look similar. Here's where the changes really make it are noticeable. Again, they all started very, very comparably. We want these runs to be apples to apples. This down here is your 6265. It had the best EGT control up until the very end. Your HX35 up here and your K27, they probably are a little bit cooler because it's pretty fat. We're pretty over-fueled for these turbos. Again, these turbos are making quite a bit more horsepower, so a lot more air going through. And so this is a little bit leaner, you get a little bit more heat there, where these guys are pretty fat. So fat, we're actually started dropping temperature. Really down through here is what you want to look at. This is the operating range where you're going to be at. The operating range, that 6265 really is amazing at getting the heat out. I'm really, really impressed with that. I'm also very impressed with these HX35 or 6064 because we have better heat right in the meat of the power, better heat control. But again, right here, we're making over 100 horsepower more over the HX35 and quite a bit more than K27, and yet we're doing it at a lower temperature. That's pretty exciting. Let me pull the power up. I want to compare this versus power. All right, so I have the power figures pulled up here so you can kind of see heat versus power. I need you guys to understand one thing. EGT is difficult to quantify in a dyno. These runs are not long like you're pulling a trailer. These runs do not have the airflow going down the freeway at 80 miles an hour or however fast you go. So the intercoolers get heat soaked. So this is interesting to look at. It's fun data, but you got to take the EGT numbers with a grain of salt because if the turbo was slower to spool and hit real quick, it'll show real good because it's such a short amount of time in the power. And that might be why the 6265 is looking really well here, because it's a short amount of time in the actual power. It looks the same because it's by RPM, but if you did this over seconds, this run would be a lot shorter than this run here because this makes much more power. EGT is sometimes tough to verify, but still fun to look at. Anyway, I am interested in this. We're gonna do some towing simulations here later in the video, so you get a little bit longer runs, but again, gotta realize that EGT testing on a dyno, not exactly representative of what you can see in the real world. Let's pull up some drive pressure. Let's look at that. All right, guys, I've got drive pressure pulled up and boost pulled up, because really what I want to know is the drive to boost ratios. If you talk to turbo people of old, they want you to be a 2-to-1 or better. If you go to top level racing, they want to be better than 1-to-1. What does that mean? Well, 1-to-1 means 60 pounds of boost, 60 pounds of drive, you're 1-to-1. If you're old school, 2-to-1 would be 60 pounds of boost, 120 pounds of drive. That's bad by modern standards, but it is acceptable-ish. You drive your turbos hard, that's what it is. But I want to know what these are. So we're gonna go right about 2,500 RPM and just run numbers. 2,500 RPM is just at or past peak horsepower on most of these chargers. You're right in the meat of the power. It's kind of like the upper level where you guys are gonna take these turbos. Let's take a look here. So first, let's start off with the Aggressor 6265. We are at 54.86 pounds of drive. Boost on that is 42.04. So running numbers on that, you're about a 1.3 is your drive to boost ratio. So your drive is 1.3 times higher than your boost. Pretty acceptable. Very good on a single turbo application, one that's not very big, and it works really well. Let's move on to the 6064. At 2,500 RPM has 59.6 pounds of drive, and our boost is 39.63. So for 1.5, so not as good as the 6265, and I wouldn't expect it to be. Always as your turbos get bigger, that gets better. Next up is the K27. Pretty excited about this one. So this one has 52.038 pounds of drive, and the boost is right at 34.2. That's dang near as good as the HX35, the 6064. That's at a 1.52. Really, really good. I think the turbine housing design on the K27 is superior to the HX35, and that's probably why you're getting that really good numbers despite having that small turbine wheel. So it's pretty cool. HX35, on the other hand, is getting to the point of being pretty out there. And so we're at a 52.6 PSI of drive pressure, and it looks like we're about 30.5 pounds of boost. That puts us like a 1.72. So we're working our way up towards that 2-to pressure ratio, boost to drive ratio, which is not good. So yeah, 2,500 RPM, you need to be shifting that HX35. There's your boost to drive ratios at 2,500 RPM. Again, the bigger the turbo is, the better it works, and it's kind of how that game gets played. All right, so let's recap these max power runs, these turbos. When would you want one of these turbos? Let's talk about the HX35. You're looking to upgrade that. That comes in your truck, so who cares about that one? What do you want? What do you need if you're gonna upgrade? If I am making a truck that I want between 300 and 400 horsepower to the ground, ultra reliable, fastest spooling combination I can get out there, it's gonna tow great, work great, fun little hot rod, I don't see a better turbo than a K27. Yes, it makes over 500 horsepower max effort, but that's kind of pushing the limits. You're pushing it as we did. If you want reliability, 400 horsepower in a stock cam, not a problem. That's when I like a K27. I want a true 500 horsepower and maybe more for some other modifications. I love the 6064. You have a small penalty in spool up. It's not a lot. And you're looking here, we're talking 30 RPM, not going to make a big difference in your towing. You may notice a little bit, but it's going to be really, really nice. And you get this gigantic rush up top. Super fun. I really like this turbo a lot. Like, honestly, I really like the 6064. As fast as it spools up, so close here, but such a huge jump up here. To me, it's just wonderful. Big fan of that turbo. It should tow awesome. It should work well and should just melt tires at will. Big fan of that one. If I'm looking for something a little bit more power and I'm going to be a little more aggressive, let's say I'm going to be a chopping throttle, barking turbos, I'm going to be just rougher, I'm maybe a teenager or a young man who's going to just drive and beat the crap out of this thing, I might be looking more at that S300 because I know it's more reliable. It's not going to leave me stranded because I did something stupid. The S300 is definitely nice. It has more power potential for sure, but it does come up with a penalty in spool. Like if you're towing in this 1800 to 1900 RPM range, you're needing 350 horsepower, you're not going to get at this turbo. You're going to have to be downshifting where no problem with these turbos here. This spot here works fine with all three of these turbos. Doesn't exist with this turbo. So if that's the RPM range you're towing in a lot, probably might want to look a little bit smaller here. But if towing really isn't your concern, you're like, I don't care, I'll downshift. That's fine with me. That's how I was. No judgment here. Then go bigger. I like big turbos. I like power. If power is your goal, go a little bigger. Anyway, I like these chargers. They all are very easy to install. The S300 does require a exhaust system change for sure. These other ones are just a bolt-ins. Be aware of that. Anyway, let's go to some tow simulations. All right, guys, I have some data pulled up from our towing runs, on towing simulation. Look down here, you'll notice I'm not using engine RPM, I am using seconds. This is seconds of the run, how long you're in the run. Started all the same place. For the most part, there's a couple weird anomalies in this one, which make a little difference going up, but in the end, I'll talk you through it. I think it's good data still. So this is seconds of the run, and the reason I'm doing this, I think it really highlight the difference in spool time. If you're pulling a trailer, you're going on the freeway, you had to let off the gas and get back on it. You know what's gonna come quicker, not as quick. Let's take a look at that right now. So let's go charger by charger. Let's start with the K27 versus the HX35. Right here, I think this difference is from this bump here and right here kind of got the charger one faster. I believe these actually spool the same as we've shown in all of our other tests so far. So they're identical, in my opinion, and they continue to where, again, the K27 pulls away. Notice up here, it's quite a bit better. As the run goes on and the RPMs get higher, which this is a higher RPM. I know it's seconds here, but the seconds also is more RPM. The K27 really holds power well. These are like 340 horsepower runs, give or take. But notice the solid line is the 6064 with that bigger turbine wheel, but the K27 is making just as much power. What you have to realize is these are all fuel limited runs. All of these chargers have enough air to clean up all of the fuel. There's no smoke at the tailpipe. Why the power difference? The power difference is going to be drive pressure related. Since the 6265 has the best drive pressure RPM, it's going to make the most power. And so you can see that in the 35 the worst. So what's really impressive to me is at this power level, the K27 makes as much power as that larger turbine wheel 6064. So it just works really well at this power level. So again, for you to 400 horsepower truck, I cannot say there's a better turbo than the K27. It just works and works really, really well. So the K27 for me is awesome. Tow's great, stock spool up, better power potential. Obviously the EGT is better down here. You can see we got a little bit better EGT control. Take these EGT readings with a grain of salt, but data does show it's better here. Let's look at the 6064. You can see it takes a little bit longer. So at the 225 horsepower mark, we're basically right here at 6 seconds, we'll say. For the 6064 to get to 225 horsepower, we're like 6.5 seconds. So it takes about a half a second longer to get there. That's gonna be noticeable. You have a trailer behind you, trying to get around a guy. It's gonna take that a little bit longer to get that spool up going. So that's something you need to be aware of. Again, the 6265, talking like 1.25 seconds longer. So you're 6 here, 7.25 basically, maybe not quite right here. So that's all very noticeable from, you know, a low RPM roll on. But once you're going, the 6265 is making good power. Your EGT control is the best, which it would be with that larger turbine wheel and that good flowing turbine housing. So they all work well. Why would you want one versus another? Let's talk about the 6265. Are you pulling like maybe good loads up steep hills? Do you have to downshift a lot? If you downshift a lot and run higher RPM, the 6265 is not a bad choice. You can see the HX35 and the K27, all these HX35 variants have EGT problems compared to this one. Again, with this data, the power is different too. This really holds the power better at RPM as it has in all the tests so far. That's noticeable. So if you're downshifting, grabbing a gear, if that doesn't bother you or you like doing that, this is gonna be way better for you. Where if you want to keep in the low RPM, the quick roll on, if it's really important to you, like, hey, I just run on the road at 1700 RPM and I want to roll it on and have boost quick, you should look at that K27. That would be a nice upgrade from your HX35, and spool's awesome. If you're willing to give a little bit of a spool penalty and have that nice reward, that big horsepower up top when you're hot running around, you know, the 6064 is a good option. So in the end, all these turbos can tow just fine. You just need to tailor fit what you want for what you're doing. If you're between 300 and 400 horsepower, get the K27. That's your answer. You're done. No more questions needed. If you're looking for 500 plus horsepower, then you got to decide how much more you want to go. And that's going to determine between the 6064 and the 6265. If more power is your goal, more hot riding is your goal, you might want to, you know, steer towards that 6265. If a little bit better towing manners, a little bit better street manners with a good power jump is your goal, the 6064 is the obvious answer. So at the end of the day, all these turbos will work for pretty much anyone. Just tailor fit it to what you want to do with your truck. Anyway, guys, I just want to let you know this test is kind of like, I'm going to give it a C, maybe a C plus for towing test. We kind of messed up a little bit, and I'll show you why. Here's a graph based on RPM. You kind of see we started the run a little bit too high in the window. We have really terrible data down here, 1800, 1700. This is during spool up. If we had loaded the runs down here at 1500, turbos would be spooled up, and we can see how they work here. So, you know, a lot of guys tow at 1600, 1700, 1800 RPM, and we really didn't get good data for that. I still think the data is good, but the way we did it kind of shines a better light on the bigger chargers. You kind of see how the 6265 looks like the best towing charger here, but is it really? Who tows at 2900 RPM? Because it just melts your turbos, especially this HX35. Way better if you're in a 62 millimeter charger at this RPM. So this may not be perfect for your towing simulations, but it's still very good data. So guys, What makes sense to you? What do you need? Do you want me to do another towing simulation? Put all these turbos back on the truck, load it hard in the dyno, down to the 15, 16, 1700 RPM range? Is that what you want to see? Or is this data good enough for you? Let's move on. Let's put a ported head on this bad boy. Put a bench pump on this thing. Let's start playing around with more stuff. What makes most sense to you? What's most relevant for your needs? Let me know if I need to hook this up to a trailer. Do I need to put it on the dyno, load it hard, or should I go ahead and start modding the crap out of this thing? Let me know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.